you got to beat The Undertaker in your first feud.
I didn't get to do anything. If I wanted something, by God, I took it out there. Yeah, first of all, I was really hesitant. You know, I had it on good authority Mr. McMahon wasn't interested in me. You know, I heard years ago, years before I joined WWE, or WWF at the time, that that Mr. McMahon did not think that I looked like a star. I did not put two and two together until Bruce Pritchard told me about 4 years ago, Mr. McMahon. And forgive me if I repeat a couple of things I've said before, but some of it, I don't want to sacrifice the good of the show in case a few people have heard a random story or two before. But Bruce said that finally, after Jim Ross had gone to bat for me for like a year and a half and brought up my name, that Mr. McMahon slammed his hand down on the table at a booking meeting in the fall of 1995 and said, "All right, damn it. I'll bring him in, but I'm covering up his face." So that was the caveat. I can come in, we're covering up my face. And it wasn't until this evening I saw one of the people in attendance here. They were wearing, I think, a Royal Rumble shirt. Royal Rumble January 96, when The Undertaker was wearing that like Phantom of the Opera type mask. So the first thing you have to thank for me being here is The Undertaker's toughness, because most people fracture an orbital bone, they're sitting it out until it gets better. The Undertaker wanted to continue working. WWE didn't want him in just like a hockey mask. So they had their team at Creative come up with some ideas. They eventually settled on that white, really sleek, Phantom-esque mask. But one of the prototypes that Mr. McMahon liked was the first incarnation of the Mankind mask. So I think his agreement, again, we go fall of 95. I'll bring him in, but I'm covering up his face. And they were looking for a look to fit me. And it actually looked more like Leonardo DiCaprio in Man in the Iron Mask. And it turns out that's not practical to wear every night. So it turned into this, turned into what it was, this kind of bizarre looking, fairly scary rawhide leather mask that was beige at its inception. I don't think at any point in those discussions did they ever say, like, "What's that thing gonna smell like in 3 years?" After it's been perspired in, for 20 minutes a night, and it was just, God, it smelled terrible, and it was so restricting. It was so difficult to breathe, and honestly, I didn't think the Cactus Jack character needed tweaking. Like, it worked because, by and large, because I was tweaking it on my own, and I was cutting, what some people thought were state-of-the-art promos, to the point where you can actually look up one of my promos just on 2 words, Cane Dewey. And all these years later, 25 years later, I think it still stands the test of time. And so I didn't think the character needed tweaking. But there was no, second choice. There was no plan B. And I really had to do a lot of thinking about if I wanted to shift gears. I had a long talk with my wife, then I had a long talk with Jim Ross. And I asked him up front, I was like, "Jim, what kind of pitch would you give an Aldo Montoya?" And he said, "Well, we would tell him that this is an opportunity, couldn't guarantee anything. And in my case," he goes, "you're going to be working with a top guy. You're going to be working with The Undertaker in a major angle." And did a lot of thinking about it. I went back to Japan. And I was reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I was listening to the music of Tori Amos. And that combination somehow brought it to my mind, this idea of almost a Frankenstein-esque character who was kind of a victim of society. Wasn't necessarily evil, but society had turned him evil. And luckily, I had 11 and a half years under my belt by the time I went to WWE. And so Mr. McMahon sat me down and he goes, "You mind if I give you a little more Vince here?" He goes, "Have you heard your name?" And I said, "No," and I lied. Luckily, someone from Talent Relations had told me the name, which I thought was god-awful. And he goes, "In this business, we've had crushers, we've had destroyers, we've had executioners, but we've never had a mutilator." a mutilator. And that's what you are. And then he added the name Mason. Mason, the mutilator. He said, what do you think, pal? And I said, I like it. A lot. But what if we just changed it a little bit so it was the Mason the Mutilator experience? No, I said, what if we changed it to Mankind? Mankind the Mutilator. And he goes, I'm not sure I understand. And he had a notepad. And he would take notes on everything I told him. I said, that way it would be like a double meaning. It would be like the fate of mankind, the future of mankind, the destruction of mankind. And then one by one, I said, what if? What if I had a separate set of exit music? Okay, why, pal? I said, because the only thing that brings this character peace of mind is to witness human suffering. Oh, I like that a lot. And I got to WrestleMania. By the way, this is a news flash that most people don't know. I got a call about a week ahead of WrestleMania. Jim Ross, I was all settled to debut the day after WrestleMania. He goes, we get Jesus, Jim Ross doesn't sound anything like Mr. McMahon. And he told me they had plans for me, potential plans. I said, well, yeah, what do you think? He's like, we're thinking Mankind against The Undertaker, WrestleMania. Because Kevin Nash was in contract negotiations. And I don't want to say Kevin's about the money. But I could probably call Kevin right now and he'd tell you that Kevin's about the money. But they were holding up in contract negotiations and they wanted to know if I could come in, and they ended up settling things. But it was a very close call. I almost debuted at WrestleMania and stayed the day after. I got there 4 days earlier and was handed my information packet for WrestleMania, and it just said Mutilator on it. And I guess that's my name. Wasn't until the next day I came out and I heard Howard Finkel say, coming down the aisle, Mankind. No Mutilator, just Mankind. I defeated Bob Holly, and by God, a mandible claw, which I had suggested to Mr. McMahon as a way that was somewhat easier on the body than dropping elbows from an elevated platform. One of the challenges of my life is not to step out onto any type of elevated platform and think of ways to throw my body off it. And then later that night, I on Monday Night Raw, I interfered in The Undertaker's match, put him in the mandible claw. I think Jerry Briscoe deserves a lot of credit for me still walking Mr. McMahon as well, because he wanted to know something I could do to The Undertaker. And I said, I can drop an elbow off a TV truck. And Jerry looks at me and goes, now we know you like to do some things of that nature. And there may come a time when we ask you to do some of those things. But until that time, we ask you to please not do any of those things. And so I dropped an elbow off the ring apron. I put the mandible claw, and Undertaker sold it like crazy. Diamond Dallas Page immediately called up Eric Bischoff and said, bro, that's going to draw. And we were kind of off to the races. The day before, the night after, following Mania, the after Mania party, a couple of the guys told me, like, this was going to be the end of my career. I was going to lose to The Undertaker, and that was it. And I was like, well, of course I'm going to lose to The Undertaker. Have you checked my one-loss record at WCW? Like, I'm still Cactus Jack. I lose matches, and I do it well. That's what I do. That's what I bring to the table. And I was just happy to be in the ring with the guy I thought was the best, the best character-driven performer in the business. I'm watching that entrance from the best seat in the house every night. The Undertaker gets up there and, he turns on the lights, and the powers that only he has. He steps into the ring, and Paul Bearer opens his mouth to reveal a slice of cucumber on his tongue. At which point, the dead man literally starts dry heaving in the middle of the ring.